The plant in Apollo sat right up against the main road, Route 66. It was less than 100 feet from the house that I grew up in and other homes. We didn't pay any attention to what was across the street.
In the late 1950s, the Nuclear Materials and Equipment Corporation won contracts to supply fuel for the U.S. Navy's atom-powered submarines. At one NUMEC facility in Parks Township, Pennsylvania, and another in nearby Apollo, the company processed thousands of pounds of bomb-grade uranium and plutonium, as well as other radioactive materials, according to government and company documents reviewed by the Wall Street Journal.
My name is Patty Amino. I'm retired from the United States Navy. I'm also a former federal agent with the Defense Department.
Patty Amino has spent the last 20-plus years of her life fighting to clean up nuclear waste in and around Apollo, her hometown in western Pennsylvania.
While we were assured that this was supposed to have been just low-level waste, after going through tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of documents, I knew otherwise.
The incident came at a time when Russia and the U.S. were...
During the Cold War, hundreds of locations around the country were pressed into service to do atomic work. As the Cold War wound down in the 1980s, the Department of Energy and other federal agencies were left with a staggering cleanup job involving some 2 million acres in 35 states. The government estimates the eventual tab could be about $350 billion.
My dad had retired from the steel mill, and he asked me, Patty, you're retired from the government, can you find out what's going on across the street? I said, what are you talking about? He says, well, this was a nuclear plant. And he says, well, the company's not telling us anything. And I says, well, the company's not going to tell you anything. They're going to protect their own interest. He says, but the Nuclear Regulatory Commission isn't telling us anything. And I was just fresh out of the government. And I said, well, there's got to be a communication breakdown. My goal here was to have the government come in. When I was out picketing all by myself with sandwich board signs, I was talking to the then manager of the company. I said, please, you're leaving. We're going to need some help here, the community. You're friends with the federal government. Can you help us get the federal government in here? And his reply was, well, Ms. Amino, you're implying that there's something is wrong here, and there's nothing wrong. Everything was perfectly safe here, and nothing went over the fence.
At the time, the government had determined that the waste was not a threat. While the two NUMEC facilities were eventually torn down, contaminated materials from their operations were left buried next to the old Parks Township site in a field now known as the Shallow Land Disposal Area. For years, local residents strolled and played on the field, which slopes down to the nearby Kiskiminitas River. Few had any idea what was underfoot.
These sites, this was commonplace in how they dealt with not only at NUMEC but across the country. Stone throws distance away from people's homes. We served our country here. Is that what happens? You just walk away and forget about us? There's documents in here.
Working out of her cluttered home office, Miss Amino spoke with hundreds of people, poured through tens of thousands of pages of documents, and spent large amounts of her own money on her one-woman nuclear crusade.
Working on this has been depressing. It has been sad, the grief. Words cannot express the level of faith that I had and other people in this area had in our government, and then to realize that we had been lied to. This isn't right. This isn't American. This is so un-American. They were supposed to start up next year. Now they're talking 2015 again.
Her critics say that Miss Amino has frightened people unnecessarily about the potential dangers from the dump site. She fought to win compensation from the companies that owned and operated the plants for hundreds of area residents, including herself, whose health was allegedly damaged by the atomic activities. The firms, which have consistently denied wrongdoing, eventually settled without admitting fault and paid out about $80 million, more health-related litigation is pending. Legislative aides say Miss Amino's activism was instrumental in convincing Congress to pass a 2002 law requiring cleanup at the shallow land disposal area. It took nearly 10 years before the Army Corps of Engineers started digging in 2011, work that was stopped 2 months later.
When the Army Corps of Engineers took shovel to dirt on what was classified by them, quote unquote, as the least troubling of the trenches, they had to stop. They had been bringing up at a depth of less than 8 feet Category 1 material. You're talking plutonium, uranium-233, or high-enriched uranium-235. The funny thing about this, for years, there was never even a fence around that site.
Government officials will only say there was a discovery of unexpected amounts of complex materials. But according to government documents and people familiar with the site, excavators came across an unexpectedly large amount of nuclear material that could be used in atomic bombs. The Army Corps of Engineers said it is currently reviewing how to move forward on the project.
The ultimate goal is to make sure that the waste dump is comprehensively and safely removed, that our river, the sediment of that river, be addressed and tested all the way down so that we can come out from this nuclear legacy and leave something for the future generations.